The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in the cramped downtown bus terminal, casting harsh shadows across cracked linoleum floors that had seen decades of hurried footsteps and forgotten dreams. Sarah Martinez clutched her worn canvas bag closer to her chest, the zipper held together with safety pins and stubborn hope. Inside that bag lay everything that mattered. Her last $17, a job application she'd filled out in pencil because pens were a luxury, and half a turkey sandwich, wrapped in yesterday's newspaper. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Her 6-year-old daughter Emma sat beside her on the plastic bench, swinging her legs in scuffed sneakers that were 2 sizes too big, inherited from a neighbor's older child. The little girl's stomach growled audibly, a sound that cut through Sarah's heart like broken glass. They hadn't eaten since breakfast, which had been nothing more than shared instant oatmeal with water instead of milk. Sarah unwrapped the sandwich, its edges slightly stale but still precious, and was about to tear it in half when she noticed him. The man sat 3 benches away, his expensive charcoal suit wrinkled and stained with what looked like coffee down the front. His usually perfectly styled silver hair was disheveled, and his face bore the weight of someone who had just received the worst news of his life. Marcus Wellington, though Sarah didn't know his name yet, was the CEO of Wellington Industries, a multi-billion-dollar corporation that employed thousands across the country. But in this moment, stripped of his usual confidence and surrounded by the chaos of his crumbling world, he looked like nothing more than a broken human being. Sarah watched as Marcus fumbled through his jacket pockets with trembling hands, pulling out what appeared to be a crumpled letter. Even from a distance, she could see his shoulders shaking, though whether from anger or grief, she couldn't tell. His phone buzzed incessantly on the bench beside him, but he ignored it completely, staring at the letter as if it contained the secrets of the universe or perhaps his own death sentence. Emma tugged at Sarah's sleeve, her small voice barely above a whisper. "Mommy, I'm really hungry." The words pierced Sarah's already fragile resolve. She looked down at the sandwich in her hands, then back at her daughter's pale face, then across the terminal at the man who seemed lost in his own private hell. Something deep in her chest, perhaps the same instinct that had kept her fighting through 2 years of homelessness and countless rejections, told her that his hunger was different from theirs, but no less real. The terminal around them buzzed with the usual chaos of urban transit. Commuters rushed past with barely a glance, their lives too busy and important to notice the small dramas unfolding on uncomfortable benches. The intercom crackled with announcements about delayed buses and gate changes, but Sarah heard none of it. Her entire focus had narrowed to the impossible choice in her hands and the growing certainty that sometimes the right thing to do was also the hardest. She stood up slowly, her joints stiff from sitting on the unforgiving plastic, and made her way across the terminal. Each step felt heavier than the last, weighted down by the magnitude of what she was about to do. Emma followed, her small hand finding Sarah's free one, sensing that something important was happening even if she didn't understand what. Marcus didn't notice their approach until Sarah's shadow fell across his letter. When he looked up, his eyes were red-rimmed and hollow, the eyes of a man who had lost everything that mattered to him in the span of a single afternoon. Sarah saw in those eyes the same desperate hunger she recognized in her own mirror each morning, though she suspected his emptiness came from a different kind of starvation. "Excuse me," Sarah said softly, her voice barely carrying over the ambient noise of the terminal. "I couldn't help but notice you seem like you're having a rough day." She extended the sandwich toward him, still wrapped in its newspaper cocoon. "I know it's not much, but would you like to share this with us? Sometimes food tastes better when you're not eating alone." Marcus stared at the offered sandwich as if it were an alien artifact. His gaze traveled from the newspaper wrapping to Sarah's worn clothing, to Emma's 2 large sneakers and bright, curious eyes. In his world of corporate boardrooms and 5-star restaurants, kindness usually came with a price tag and an agenda. But there was something in Sarah's expression, a genuine warmth that seemed to emanate from somewhere deeper than social obligation, that rendered him speechless. The letter in his hands fluttered slightly as his grip loosened. It was from his lawyers, informing him that his business partner of 15 years had been embezzling funds and had disappeared with nearly half the company's liquid assets. The FBI was investigating, his board of directors was in revolt, and the media was circling like vultures. In the span of 6 hours, Marcus had gone from being one of the most respected businessmen in the city to being the face of a corporate scandal that would dominate headlines for months. He had come to the bus terminal not because he needed public transportation, but because it was the only place he could think of where no one would recognize him or ask him for statements about the scandal. His usual haunts, the exclusive clubs and restaurants where he conducted business, were now filled with reporters and former associates who looked at him with suspicion and barely concealed disgust. Marcus began, his voice hoarse from hours of shouting at lawyers and accountants. He cleared his throat and tried again. I don't think you understand who I am. Sarah smiled, an expression that seemed to light up her entire face despite the obvious exhaustion around her eyes. You're someone who looks like he could use a friend right now. That's all I need to understand. Emma stepped forward, her childlike boldness overcoming any sense of stranger danger. Are you sad? She asked Marcus directly, her head tilted to one side. My mom says when people are sad, sharing food makes everyone feel better. And I think you look really sad. The innocent observation hit Marcus like a physical blow. When was the last time someone had asked him about his feelings without wanting something in return? When was the last time anyone had offered him something without expecting a favor, a donation, or a business deal in return? He couldn't remember, and the realization was more devastating than the financial losses he'd suffered that day. Sarah unwrapped the sandwich carefully, treating it like the precious resource it was. The turkey was thin and the bread was store-brand white, but she divided it into 3 equal portions with the precision of someone who had learned to make every crumb count. She handed the largest piece to Emma, kept the smallest for herself, and offered the middle portion to Marcus. My name is Sarah, she said as she settled onto the bench beside him, creating an impromptu picnic in the middle of the urban chaos. This is Emma. We were just waiting for the next bus to take us across town for a job interview. I'm hoping to get work at the new hotel that's opening up near the University District. Marcus accepted the sandwich with hands that shook slightly, whether from hunger or emotion, he wasn't sure. Marcus, he said simply, not offering his last name or his title. For the first time in decades, he was just Marcus, not CEO Marcus. Wellington, not Mr. Wellington, not the head of a corporate empire. Just a man eating a shared sandwich with 2 strangers who had shown him more kindness in 5 minutes than he'd received from his closest business associates in years. The sandwich was simple, but it was the most meaningful meal Marcus had eaten. In memory, each bite seemed to carry with it the weight of Sarah's sacrifice, the understanding that she had given up her own sustenance to help someone she perceived as needing it more. The bread was soft.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story.
And slightly stale. The turkey was basic deli meat, but the generosity behind it made it taste like the finest cuisine he'd ever experienced. As they ate, Emma chattered about her favorite subjects in school, her dreams of becoming a veterinarian, and her worry about whether they'd find a good place to sleep that night. Sarah listened with the patience of a mother who had learned to find joy in small moments, occasionally smoothing Emma's hair or adjusting her oversized clothing. Marcus found himself drawn into their conversation, asking Emma about her favorite animals and listening to her elaborate plans for opening a clinic that would help pets whose families couldn't afford expensive treatments. She gets that from me, Sarah said with a mixture of pride and sadness. Always wanting to help others, even when we can barely help ourselves. She glanced at Marcus, noting how he seemed to relax slightly with each passing minute. What about you? Do you have family? The question hit Marcus unexpectedly hard. He had been married once, 20 years ago, but his devotion to building his business empire had slowly eroded the relationship until his wife left him for someone who could actually be present in their marriage. He had no children, having always claimed that work was his family. His parents were gone. His siblings lived across the country and called only on holidays, and his social circle consisted entirely of people who were connected to him through business relationships. No, he said quietly, surprised by how lonely the words sounded when spoken aloud. I guess I never made time for it. Emma frowned, her 6-year-old mind struggling to understand how someone could be completely alone. That's really sad, she said with the brutal honesty of childhood. Everyone needs someone to take care of them. Who makes you soup when you're sick? The question was so innocent, so fundamentally concerned with basic human care, that Marcus felt his eyes begin to water. When was the last time someone had made him soup? When was the last time someone had cared whether he was sick or well, beyond how it might affect their business dealings with him? Sarah noticed his distress and gently steered the conversation in a different direction, asking him about his favorite foods and whether he'd ever tried the small Mexican restaurant a few blocks from the terminal. She spoke easily, naturally, as if they were old friends catching up rather than strangers sharing a meager meal in a bus station. Her ability to create warmth and connection in such an unlikely setting amazed Marcus, who had spent millions on corporate consultants trying to teach his executives how to build rapport with clients and employees. As they finished eating, Sarah carefully folded the newspaper back into a neat square and tucked it into her bag. Nothing was wasted, nothing was taken for granted. Marcus watched her economical movements and realized that this woman, who had so little that she carried her entire world in a canvas bag held together with safety pins, had just demonstrated more genuine leadership and human grace than most of the executives in his company. The bus should be here soon, Sarah said, checking a schedule that was posted on a nearby pillar. She turned to Marcus with the same warm smile she'd worn when she first approached him. Thank you for sharing lunch with us. I hope whatever's troubling you gets better soon. Marcus felt a panic rising in his chest at the thought of them leaving. In the past hour, these two strangers had provided him with more authentic human connection than he'd experienced in years. The idea of returning to his empty penthouse, surrounded by lawyers and accountants, and people who now looked at him with suspicion, felt unbearable. Wait, he said, standing up as Sarah gathered her belongings. I want to ask you something, and I need you to know I'm serious. You showed me incredible kindness today, more than I deserved or had any right to expect. You shared your food with someone you'd never met, someone who could have been dangerous or unstable, simply because you thought I needed help. Sarah paused, something in his tone making her pay closer attention. There was an intensity in his voice that hadn't been there before, a weight that suggested he was about to say something important. That job interview you mentioned, Marcus continued, his business instincts beginning to resurface even as his personal gratitude continued to overwhelm him. Tell me about it. Sarah shifted Emma's hand to her other arm, clearly uncomfortable with the turn the conversation was taking. It's just housekeeping at a hotel. Nothing special. I've been out of work for about 8 months now, ever since the restaurant where I was waiting tables closed down. We've been staying in shelters mostly, sometimes with friends when we can, but it's been hard to find anything stable. The casual way she mentioned their homelessness, as if it were simply another fact of life rather than a crisis, struck Marcus like a physical blow. Here was a woman who had shared her last meal with a stranger, who was raising a bright, kind child under circumstances that would have broken most people, and she spoke of her struggles with the same matter-of-fact tone most people used to discuss. The weather. Sarah, Marcus said, and something in his voice made her look at him more carefully. I need to tell you who I am. My name is Marcus Wellington. I own Wellington Industries. Do you know that company? Sarah's eyes widened slightly. Even someone in her situation knew the name Wellington Industries. It was one of the largest employers in the city, with the distinctive Wellington logo visible on buildings and billboards throughout the downtown area. She began, then stopped, clearly trying to process the information. I'm the CEO, yes, Marcus said. Or at least I was until about 6 hours ago, when I found out that my business partner had been stealing from the company and had disappeared with enough money to potentially destroy everything I've spent 20 years building. He pulled out the crumpled letter, holding it like evidence of his fall from grace. I came here because I needed to be somewhere where no one knew who I was, where I could just sit and try to figure out how my entire life had collapsed in a single afternoon. Emma looked back and forth between the adults, sensing the gravity of the moment even if she didn't understand all the details. Are you a really important person? She asked Marcus with the directness that only children possess. Marcus knelt down to Emma's eye level, his expensive suit making contact with the grimy terminal floor without hesitation. I thought I was, he said honestly. I had a big company and a lot of money and people who worked for me. But sitting here with you and your mom, sharing that sandwich, I realized that none of those things made me as rich as I thought they did. He stood up and faced Sarah again, his expression serious but no longer defeated. You gave me something today that I haven't had in years. You treated me like a human being instead of a business opportunity. You shared what little you had without asking for anything in return. You let your daughter talk to me about her dreams and asked me about my life like it mattered. Sarah felt a chill of apprehension. In her experience, when wealthy people started talking about what they wanted to give you in return for kindness, it usually came with strings attached that were worse than the original problem. Mr. Wellington, she began carefully, we didn't help you because we wanted something from you. We helped you because it was the right thing to do. I know, Marcus said quickly, recognizing her wariness and understanding it completely. That's exactly why I want to help you now. Not as a business transaction, not as charity that comes with conditions or expectations, but because you showed me what real human decency looks like, and I want to return that gift. The bus pulled up to the platform with a wheeze of hydraulic brakes and the acrid smell of diesel exhaust. Other passengers began queuing up, and Sarah felt the familiar anxiety of needing to make a decision quickly. The interview was important, possibly their last chance to get back on their feet before winter made living on the streets even more dangerous. That job interview, Marcus said urgently, forget about it. I want to offer you something better. Not just a job, but a real opportunity. My company needs good people, people with integrity and kindness and the ability to see others as human beings rather than assets to be managed. You demonstrated all of those qualities in the span of an hour. Sarah shook her head, stepping toward the bus. Mr. Wellington, I appreciate the offer, but I don't have any business experience. I've been a waitress, a house cleaner, a retail worker. I don't belong in a corporate environment. You're wrong, Marcus said, following her toward the bus door. You have something that can't be taught in business school or learned from corporate training programs. You have emotional intelligence, genuine empathy, and the ability to make people feel valued. Those are the most important qualifications anyone can have. The bus driver called for all passengers to board, and Sarah felt the moment slipping away. Emma tugged at her hand, excited by the possibility of a new adventure, but also sensing her mother's uncertainty. If I said yes, Sarah said slowly, what exactly are you offering? Marcus pulled a business card from his wallet, then took out a pen and wrote something on the back. I'm offering you a position as Director of Human Resources for our hospitality division. It's a real job with a real salary, not charity. You'll have health insurance, a 401k, 2 weeks paid vacation to start, and opportunities for advancement, based on your performance. Sarah stared at the card as if it might disappear if she looked away. Director of Human Resources sounded impossibly important, impossibly beyond her qualifications. I don't understand, she said. Why would you trust someone you just met with an important position in your company? Because in the past hour, you've shown me more about effective management and human relations than most people learn in their entire careers, Marcus replied. You assessed a situation, identified a need, and took action to address it without being asked. You treated a stranger with dignity and respect. You maintained your composure under pressure and made decisions that benefited everyone involved. Those are the qualities I need in my organization. Emma looked up at her mother with wide, hopeful eyes. Mommy, does this mean we won't have to sleep in the shelter anymore? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with all the dreams and fears that had shaped their lives for the past 2 years. Sarah looked at Marcus, searching his face for any sign of insincerity or hidden agenda, but found only genuine determination and something that looked remarkably like gratitude. There's something else, Marcus said quietly, so only Sarah could. Here, my company owns several apartment complexes around the city. Good places, safe neighborhoods, close to schools. If you accept the position, I can arrange for you to have a 2-bedroom apartment at a reasonable rent, something that fits within your salary rather than consuming it entirely. The bus driver honked the horn impatiently, and several passengers called out for them to make a decision. Sarah looked at the card in her hands, then at her daughter's hopeful face, then back at Marcus. This feels too good to be true, she said honestly. In my experience, when something seems too good to be true, it usually is. Marcus nodded, understanding her skepticism completely. You're right to be cautious. I'm essentially asking you to trust a stranger, the same way you asked me to trust you when you offered me that sandwich. The difference is that you were risking your lunch, and I'm asking you to risk your future. He paused, then continued with quiet intensity. But I want you to know that this offer comes with no conditions except that you do your best work and treat people with the same respect you showed me today. If for any reason it doesn't work out, if you decide the corporate world isn't for you, or if I've misjudged your abilities, you'll leave with a positive reference and enough severance pay to get back on your feet somewhere else. Emma tugged harder on Sarah's hand. The bus is leaving, Mommy. Sarah made her decision in that instant, the same intuitive leap that had led her to offer food to a stranger an hour earlier. She handed Emma onto the bus, but stopped at the door to look back at Marcus. Mr. Wellington, she said, if you're serious about this, if this is really a legitimate offer and not some kind of elaborate gesture you'll regret tomorrow, then yes, I'll take the job. Marcus felt a smile spread across his face, the first genuine expression of joy he'd experienced in months. I'm serious, more serious than I've ever been about any business decision I've made. Sarah stepped off the bus and let it leave without them, watching its taillights disappear into the urban traffic. Emma looked up at her with concern. Are we going to be okay, Mommy? Sarah picked up her daughter and held her close, breathing in the scent of her hair and feeling, for the first time in years, like the future might hold something better than mere survival. I think we're going to be more than okay, baby, she whispered. I think we're going to be happy. Part 2. 3 weeks later, Sarah sat in her new office on the 15th floor of the Wellington Industries building, looking out over a city that had once seemed indifferent to her existence. The transformation had been so rapid and complete that she sometimes wondered if she would wake up back in the bus terminal, clutching her canvas bag and wondering where to find their next meal. But the office was real, with its clean modern furniture and windows that offered a view of the park where Emma now played after school. The apartment was real too, a bright 2-bedroom space with a functioning kitchen and a bathroom that didn't require coins to operate. Most importantly, the work was real, challenging, and meaningful in ways that Sarah was only beginning to understand. Her first assignment had been to review the company's employee satisfaction surveys and identify areas where morale could be improved. What she found shocked her. Despite competitive salaries and comprehensive benefits, Wellington Industries had one of the highest employee turnover rates in the industry. Exit interviews revealed a pattern of complaints about feeling undervalued, overworked, and disconnected from the company's mission. Sarah recognized the symptoms immediately. These were people who felt invisible, just as she had felt invisible for so many months while living on the streets. They were going through the motions of their jobs without feeling truly seen or appreciated by their supervisors. It was a different kind of hunger than the one she had experienced, but hunger nonetheless. She spent her first weeks walking through different departments, talking to employees at every level, from janitorial staff to senior managers. She listened to their concerns, learned their names, and asked about their families and their goals. Many of them seemed surprised that someone from the executive floor was interested in their opinions, but Sarah's genuine warmth and obvious lack of corporate pretension gradually won them over. Marcus watched her work with growing amazement. In 3 weeks, Sarah had accomplished more in terms of employee engagement than the previous HR director had managed in 3 years. She had a natural ability to make people feel heard and valued, and she approached every interaction with the same generous spirit she had shown him in the bus terminal. The December employee satisfaction scores came back, Marcus said, entering Sarah's office with a folder full of reports. "I think you're going to want to see these." Sarah accepted the folder with the careful attention she gave to all aspects of her new job. Even after 3 weeks, she still felt like she was learning a new language, trying to decode the corporate metrics and performance indicators that Marcus and the other executives discussed with such fluency. The numbers told a remarkable story. In less than a month, employee satisfaction had increased by 12% across all departments. More significantly, the number of employees who reported feeling valued by their supervisors had nearly doubled. Several departments that had been struggling with high turnover rates were now seeing people withdraw their resignation letters and commit to staying with the company. "How did you do this?" Marcus asked, settling into the chair across from Sarah's desk. The previous HR director had advanced degrees and 15 years of experience, but she never achieved results like this. Sarah set down the folder and looked out the window, where she could see Emma playing on the swings in the park below. The little girl had adapted to their new circumstances with the resilience of childhood, but Sarah knew that the security of their situation had allowed Emma to relax and smile more freely than she had in years. "I think people just want to be seen," Sarah said simply. "Really seen, not just as employees or productivity units, but as human beings with lives and concerns and dreams that extend beyond their job descriptions." She turned back to Marcus, her expression thoughtful. "When we were living in the shelters, the hardest part wasn't the uncomfortable beds or the bad food. It was the way people looked right through us, like we were invisible or somehow less real than everyone else. I see that same look in some of our employees' eyes when they talk about their supervisors." Marcus nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. He had been guilty of that same blindness for years, seeing his employees as assets on a balance sheet rather than individuals with their own struggles and aspirations. "So what do you recommend we do about it?" Sarah pulled out a notebook filled with her careful handwriting, observations and ideas she had been collecting during her conversations with employees throughout the building. "I want to start a program called Lunch and Learn," she said, flipping to a page covered with diagrams and bullet points. "Once a week, different departments will have lunch together and share what they're working on, what challenges they're facing, and what they need from other parts of the company to be successful." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "That sounds like a lot of meetings. People already complain about having too many meetings." Sarah shook her head. "It's not about meetings, it's about connection. Right now, the accounting department doesn't know what the marketing team is struggling with, and the marketing team doesn't understand why the accounting department needs certain reports formatted in specific ways. Everyone is working in silos, getting frustrated with each other instead of working together toward common goals." She flipped to another page in her notebook. "I also want to institute monthly recognition ceremonies, but not the typical employee of the month approach. Instead, I want to highlight people who have gone above and beyond to help their colleagues, who have shown kindness or creativity or problem-solving skills that made someone else's job easier." Marcus found himself leaning forward, genuinely intrigued by her ideas. They were simple concepts, but they addressed fundamental human needs that most corporate programs overlooked entirely. "There's something else," Sarah continued, her voice taking on a more serious tone. "I've been talking to people in the cafeteria, the security guards, the cleaning staff. They're technically employed by outside contractors, but they work in our building every day. They see our employees more than their own families do. and yet they're completely invisible to most of our management team. She stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the bustling street below. I want to include them in our employee appreciation events. I want to learn their names and ask about their families and treat them like they're part of our community, because they are. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, absorbing the implications of what Sarah was proposing. In the corporate world he had inhabited for decades, there were clear hierarchies and boundaries that were not meant to be crossed. Executives didn't fraternize with support staff and certainly didn't include contracted workers in company events. But Sarah's approach had already produced measurable results in just 3 weeks. More importantly, Marcus had seen how her genuine care for people created a ripple effect throughout the organization. Employees who felt valued by Sarah were more likely to show appreciation for their colleagues, creating a culture of mutual support that was transforming the entire workplace atmosphere. "Do it," he said finally. "All of it. Whatever resources you need, whatever budget requirements. Just put together a proposal and I'll approve it." Sarah turned from the window, a smile spreading across her face. "Really? Just like that?" Marcus stood up, walking to the door of her office before turning back. "Sarah, in 20 years of running this company, I've never made a better investment than the one I made when I offered you this job. You're not just changing our HR policies, you're changing our entire corporate culture. You're making this place somewhere that people actually want to work, not just somewhere they have to work." He paused, his expression growing more serious. "There's something I need to tell you, something I should have mentioned weeks ago. When I offered you this position, it wasn't entirely altruistic. Yes, I was grateful for your kindness in the bus terminal, and yes, I recognized your natural abilities. But I was also desperate." Sarah felt a familiar chill of apprehension. "What do you mean?" "The scandal with my business partner, the embezzlement, it was worse than I initially let on. The FBI investigation is ongoing, and there's a possibility that I could face charges myself, not for any wrongdoing, but because I should have known what was happening and failed to prevent it." Marcus ran his hands through his hair, a gesture that Sarah recognized from their first meeting. "I hired you because I needed someone I could trust completely, someone who would help me rebuild this company's reputation and culture while I dealt with the legal ramifications of my partner's crimes. I needed someone who understood what it was like to lose everything and still maintain their integrity." Sarah sank back into her chair, processing this new information. "Are you telling me that my job is contingent on you staying out of prison?" "No," Marcus said quickly. "That's exactly what I'm not saying. Your employment contract is with Wellington Industries, not with me personally. If I have to step down as CEO, if I have to serve jail time, if the worst-case scenario comes to pass, your position and your apartment lease and Emma's enrollment in her new school will all remain secure." He pulled out a legal document from his briefcase and placed it on Sarah's desk. "This is a contract addendum that guarantees your employment and compensation for a minimum of 3 years, regardless of any changes in company leadership or ownership. I had the lawyers draw it up after your first week here, when it became clear that you were exactly what this company needed." Sarah stared at the document without picking it up. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because the FBI wants to interview you," Marcus said quietly. "They're investigating all of my recent hiring decisions, trying to determine if there was any impropriety or if I was attempting to hide assets by paying inflated salaries to friends or relatives." The room fell silent except for the distant hum of traffic from the street below. Sarah felt the familiar weight of uncertainty settling over her, the same feeling she had experienced countless times when it seemed like stability was within reach, only to be snatched away by circumstances beyond her control. "What do I need to tell them?" she asked finally. "The truth," Marcus replied. "Tell them exactly how we met, exactly what happened in the bus terminal, exactly why I offered you this job. Tell them about the work you've been doing here, the results you've achieved, the positive impact you've had on our employees." He sat back down, his expression earnest. "Sarah, I need you to understand something. When I offered you this position, I was thinking with my heart instead of my head. I was so moved by your kindness, so impressed by your natural abilities, that I didn't consider how it might look to outside investigators. Hiring someone with no corporate experience for a high-level position, someone I had just met under unusual circumstances, it raises red flags. Sarah nodded, understanding the implications completely. They think you're paying me an inflated salary as some kind of money laundering scheme. It's possible, Marcus admitted. But the work you've done here, the measurable improvements in employee satisfaction and retention, that's your defense. You've earned every penny of your salary and more. The FBI will see that when they review your performance metrics. Emma's laughter drifted up from the park below, a sound that reminded Sarah of everything she had to lose if this situation went badly. She had gone from homelessness to executive leadership in a matter of weeks, a transformation so dramatic that it probably did look suspicious to outside observers. What happens if they don't believe our story? She asked. Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering the question carefully. In the worst-case scenario, they might ask you to resign while they complete their investigation. But even if that happens, the contract I just gave you ensures that you'll continue to receive your salary and benefits until they clear you of any wrongdoing, which I'm confident they will. He leaned forward, his expression intense. Sarah, I need you to know that I have never regretted offering you this job, not for a single moment. You have transformed this company in ways that I'm still discovering. Our stock price has stabilized, our employee turnover has plummeted, and our customer satisfaction scores are at an all-time high. How is that possible? Sarah asked. I've only been here 3 weeks. Because happy employees provide better customer service, Marcus explained. Because people who feel valued and appreciated go above and beyond in their work. Because the culture you're creating here is making this company a place where people want to do their best work, and that excellence is visible to everyone we interact with. Sarah picked up the contract addendum and read through it carefully. The legal language was complex, but the basic message was clear. Her position was secure regardless of what happened to Marcus or the ongoing investigation. There's something I need to tell you too, she said, setting the document back down. The day we met in the bus terminal, I almost didn't approach you. I sat there for 10 minutes debating whether to share my sandwich or save it for Emma's dinner. Marcus waited for her to continue, sensing that she was working up to something important. What convinced me to come over was something Emma said. She asked me why the sad man was sitting all alone and whether anyone ever brought him soup when he was sick. Her question made me realize that everyone deserves to have someone care about their well-being, regardless of who they are or what they've done. Sarah stood up and walked to her desk drawer, pulling out a framed photo of Emma on her first day at her new school. The little girl was grinning widely, showing off a gap where she had recently lost a tooth, her backpack nearly as big as she was. I took this job because I needed it, Sarah continued, but I've stayed because I believe in what we're doing here. I've seen how much difference it makes when people feel valued and supported. I've watched employees who were ready to quit become some of our most dedicated team members, all because someone finally listened to their concerns and treated them like human beings. She turned to face Marcus directly. So yes, I'll talk to the FBI. I'll tell them everything about how we met and why you hired me and what I've been doing here. And if they don't believe that genuine kindness and human decency can be the foundation of good business practices, then that's their problem, not ours. Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him, followed immediately by a renewed sense of determination. Thank you, he said simply, for everything. For sharing your sandwich that day, for taking a chance on this job, for bringing your incredible heart and intelligence to this company. He stood up to leave, then paused at the door. The FBI interview is scheduled for next Wednesday. Is there anything you need from me to prepare? Sarah shook her head. Just keep being the person you were in that bus terminal, she said. The person who was humble enough to accept help from a stranger, who was grateful enough to want to return that kindness. That's the person I agreed to work for, and that's the person who's going to get us through this investigation. After Marcus left, Sarah remained in her office, looking out at the park where Emma was now climbing on the jungle gym with a group of new friends from her school. The transformation in her daughter's life had been as dramatic as her own, and Sarah knew that whatever challenges lay ahead with the FBI investigation, they would face them together as they always had. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.